This is a video tutorial of the Blue Castle. Basically, it comes down to man cannot live by serious literature alone. And the Blue Castle is the kind of book that would be really good to use in your classroom, even though it's not as serious as other books that I'm going to talk about. Now, the thing is that I think a lot of the things the educators don't realize is that students have to kind of be weaned into literature. Okay, for personally, I started out with mysteries, and a lot of people kind of think, oh, mysteries are beneath them, they're not real literature and things like that. They've got kind of a snobbish attitude towards some of the more plot-driven literature out there. And I think that's really sad because plot is fantastic. Like plot can be really good. And it can take a while to acquire the taste for true, I guess what you would call literature. Okay. The Blue Castle is written by L.M. Montgomery. And up till the point, when was it? I think I was actually already grown up. I was probably already married when I read The Blue Castle. Up to that point, I had actually thought Anne of Green Gables was the best book that Ellen Montgomery had written. I mean, I did read the Story Girl, which was a story about a girl who, among her cousins, she's like the story girl, and it's the one skill that she has, and her other cousins are better at like the domestic arts. But I wasn't that impressed with Story Girl. But when I read The Blue Castle, it became one of my favorite books. And I think it does deserve a place in the classroom curriculum. Now, everybody knows Anne of Green Gables. The Blue Castle is set not in Prince Edward Island, where she was like born and raised. It's set in Muskoka in northern Ontario. And it's about a girl named Valency Sterling. And Valency is turning 29 years old. And she has never been sought for marriage. That's the premise it starts out. But quickly it becomes a lot deeper. Now there are drawbacks to the book, but like I said in one of my other tutorials, that I read this book earlier before I really became like an author and more persnickety when it comes to technique and everything. The writing is good, but some of the plotting is a little, I guess, in our sensibilities nowadays, it's a little hokey, and I'll talk about that more later. But The Blue Castle is set in Muskoka. So Valency Sterling, the story opens with her turning 29 years old, and it's raining, and it's a dreary day, and she's glad it's raining because on her birthday is the same as one of her great aunt's anniversaries or something like that, and they always have a picnic, and at the picnic they always remind her that she's not married and she's never been sought after. That's like the sting, that she's never even had a beau or anything like that. And then later on, she's got a very domineering mother, and she ends up going to a doctor because she's got these queer chest pains. So when she goes to the doctor, it turns out that she's only got a year to live, that she's got this terrible heart condition. And boy, Ellen Montgomery really knows how to stir up sympathy for a character. I was reading this and I could just so relate to this poor girl, that she's just so oppressed by her family and her relatives and her situation in Deerwood. This place that they live in is called Deerwood. And it's just such a good story. Now, so the whole premise, once she knows that she's only got a year to live, she doesn't tell anybody. She decides not to tell anybody. Instead, she decides that she's going to make that year really count. And no longer will she be afraid of anything. Because really the reason why she was so downtrodden, the reason why she was so scared all the time of her mother, about everything like that, was because she had to live with these people. But now that she knows she's only got a year, she's going to do what the heck she wants. And it's really liberating. It's really, really liberating. I think in the classroom, what if you as an educator, what if you read the story to them And what if, and this is an older book. This was published, I don't know, in the 40s or the 50s or something like that, uh, or actually maybe earlier, maybe in the 20s. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, 1926. It was published first, 1926. So it has more formal language, which is, I think, a really good thing. It's good that it has more formal language that the kids can really relate to it. But it's not like Old English or anything that's that hard to understand. And uh, what if you gave the students an assignment that they all have to write something about their lives? What if they were told, like Valency is at the beginning of the story, that they only have a year to live? How would that change their life? What would they do? What would they, what would be on their bucket list? And then as the story progresses, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the story that there's a rivalry between Valency and her cousin Olive. Now, Olive is everything that Valency isn't. She's like popular and she's rich and she's got all of these accomplishments and all these advantages that Valency doesn't have. And everybody knows somebody like Olive in their lives. And Ella Montgomery does a fantastic job of showing us how, like in a subjective way, I mean, we're really invested in Valency's, what's going to happen to her and everything like that. Now, there are a number of interesting characters in the book. There's Roaring Abel. And I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter what was really happening in Ella Montgomery's life. The thing is, Roaring Abel, from what I've heard, it's actually based on her husband. Ella Montgomery, I don't know, they have a saying in Guyana. My husband's from Guyana, and my in-laws, once I was talking to them and stuff, and I heard this saying, and it's really pretty funny. They say sometimes people are so choosy, and they say they pick and they pick shit. Okay, and so they pick and they pick and they're so choosy, and then what they end up is with crap. And what happened with Ellen Montgomery, she had all these different proposals and stuff like that, and instead of going with the guy she really liked, who's actually modeled on Barney Snaith in the novel, she went with this guy who was like a reverend. He had status, he had money, he had wealth. So she ended up going with him. And maybe a lot of that frustration it comes out in the Blue Castle. Because Roaring Abel, he gets really stinking drunk a lot, and he's just a very colorful character. He's very interesting, and it's just fascinating. What happened was, when not that long ago, when we went to the Maritimes, on our way back we went to PEI, and I was so eager to see Green Gables. But just down the road, and Green Gables, they had tourist buses at this little tiny white clapboard house that was Green Gables, that Ellen Montgomery based Anne of Green Gables on, like in this little house. The thing is, Lucy Maud never lived there. She never lived in Green Gables, and the way they have commercialized Green Gables in PEI, it's a shame. It's a shame, because Anne Shirley of the book really would have hated it. She would have hated what it has become. Just down the road, on the way back, there's actually another little house that's much more historic to Lucy Maud Montgomery. It's actually the house she grew up in, and it belonged to her grandparents. And it's a little house, and the funny thing is, I mean, we went in there, and the two ladies, there were two little old ladies who were like the curators of this kind of little museum. And we were talking, and I said, well, the funny thing is, I actually like the Blue Castle better than Anne of Green Gables. And the funny thing was that the lady, she said, me too, me too. And the Blue Castle, this was set in that house, okay? And you read the first part, and she's talking about this little room with the sloped roof and how tiny and cramped it is. And you go upstairs in this house in PEI, and you see the room. Okay, you see the room. And I mean, it doesn't have all the pictures on the walls that were on the walls in the thing, but in the story, but oh, you see the room. And oh, it was so surreal. Okay, it was so surreal to see this. And I had read The Blue Castle. I had loved The Blue Castle. And while I was there, I ended up buying some of her selected journals. They were published posthumously. And I had bought some of her journals, and I started reading them, but then I stopped because apparently what she had done was she'd gone into the journals and she'd crossed out things and she'd torn out pages. And I thought, well, if she edited her journals, I don't really want to read them then, because then it's only what she wanted me to hear. Anyways, The Blue Castle is a fantastic book. Towards the end, and I guess I should mention this, even though it's a bit of a spoiler, towards the end, I would have been happy. The theme of this book is really about Valancy wanting her own little dust pile. Now, in one of the stories, one of the little anecdotes she shares about her cousin Olive, Valancy talks about this incident that happened in her school years, where all the girls were making these dust piles in the road. They were just going into the road and they were piling up dust, and they were trying to see who could make the biggest dust pile. And Olive was apparently really good at that. And so and she was so popular and everything, and all the girls said, oh, let's all put our dust piles together to make Olive's bigger. So they were all taking the dust piles. And Valancy was just desperately trying not to keep her own little dust pile. And they said, oh, you're just selfish, you're just this and that. She said, no, she can have her dust pile. I don't care how big her dust pile is. I just want one of my own. And I thought it was so poignant. And I thought, that's what this story is about. It's about a girl who wants her own dust pile. Okay, if she wants her own dust pile. And I wish she had just left it at that. Like, I wish she didn't add all the stuff that, okay, she's got to outdo Olive. It's kind of like when you read Jane Eyre, and Jane Eyre has to become like rich in order to deserve or to be on par with Mr. Rochester, and I just don't buy that. I really just don't buy that. So this story is really about Valancy wanting her own dust pile, and I think that's something that every student can relate to, that they can all know that, we each deserve our own little piece of the earth, our own little domain. And that's what the story is really about. And it's a fun read. It's really funny in places. It's a little romantic in places. It's just lovely, and I think the boys would like it too. I kind of do think the boys would like it. It depends on the age of the students. Maybe if you did it for maybe grade 7 or 8, yeah, maybe that age group, they would like it. And I think what you could do is explain to them that the objective of the language, because they need to know that it's about learning the language and getting familiar with more formal ways of communicating. And yeah, it's just a nice happy story. I think a lot of the time we shove literature down the students' throat, literature that always deals with like really heavy, solid themes and stuff like that. And I love books like that. I mean, I'm going to be talking about Crime and Punishment. I'm going to be talking about other more serious books too. But hey, you can't live on just serious stuff alone. You need some dessert sometimes. You can't just have steak all the time. You want to have something sweet once in a while, or at least I do. I've got a real sweet tooth. So this is one of the lighter reads that I highly, highly recommend. Okay, and I hope you will check out the other tutorials. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you very much.